Imagine an economy where the biggest, boldest player is no longer a tech giant or a bank, but the government itself.
From battery factories in America, built with billions in subsidies, to European steel plants desperately reinventing themselves to survive expensive energy and new climate rules.
Chinese ports shipping out wave after wave of cheap industrial goods to the rest of the world.
Welcome to the era of the supersized state, where governments pull more economic levers than at any time in recent decades.
Not long ago, the story was the opposite. The 1990s age of small government and big, confident markets. Politicians promised to privatize, deregulate, and let markets decide which companies lived or died.
Tariffs fell, capital flowed across borders, and global trade surged on the promise of endless efficiency. For a while, it worked. Growth was strong, imports were cheap, and credit felt like it would stay easy forever. Then the global financial crisis hit, and the same governments that had stepped back were forced to rescue collapsing banks.
Behind every bailout were ordinary workers and towns asking why the system had rewarded risk takers and left them with the bill.
Inequality, austerity, and anger over lost factories started to chip away at the old faith in unfettered markets.
Then climate change turned from a distant concern into a costly, visible reality. Fires, floods, and storms hitting lives and balance sheets.
And the pandemic showed that when the worst hits, people still turn to the state for protection, vaccines, and emergency cash.
Global supply chains, once celebrated as lean and efficient, suddenly looked fragile, even ridiculous.
Today, the outlook is a world of slower growth, with many forecasts putting global expansion at just around 3%.
At the same time, central banks keep interest rates relatively high to make sure inflation doesn't come roaring back.
Slow growth and high borrowing costs would normally mean caution, austerity, and smaller ambitions.
Instead, something unusual is happening. States are marching back onto the field, bigger and more aggressive than before.
In the United States, Washington has rediscovered something it once preached against: full-throttle industrial policy. Massive packages of subsidies and tax breaks aim to bring semiconductor factories back onto American soil.
Battery plants, solar factories, and grid projects are sold not just as climate policy, but as engines of domestic jobs and power. For struggling regions, these subsidies can feel like salvation, a rare second chance after decades of industrial decline.
Officially, the language is about resilience, security, and the green transition. But underneath lies a fierce race for industrial leadership.
In Europe, the story began with fear. Soaring energy prices turned energy from a background cost into a visible crisis. Energy-intensive industries wondered if they still had a future on the continent, or if they should simply shut down or move away. The response was not just to survive the shock, but to turn it into a green industrial project for the next generation. Europe opened the door to more state aid, more public money, and more targeted support for clean technologies and heavy industry. Steel plants, cement kilns, and chemical complexes were told, modernize and decarbonize, and we will help foot the bill.
In China, the line between state and market has always been blurrier, and the latest slowdown has pushed authorities to double down.
Support for strategic sectors, electric vehicles, batteries, solar panels, and machinery has created enormous production capacity. Much of that capacity now flows outward, exported at aggressive prices into markets already under political and economic strain.
In Washington and Brussels, this is framed less as competition and more as a question of overcapacity and economic security.
Tariffs, anti-subsidy investigations, and technical barriers are spreading, slowly rewiring the rules of global trade. The result is a world where the state is deeply involved in who builds what, where, and with which technologies.
For heavy industry, this is both a lifeline and a transformation, an invitation to evolve instead of simply disappear.
Projects that once seemed too costly, hydrogen steel, low-carbon cement, cleaner aluminium, suddenly make sense with the state as co-investor.
But none of this is free. Many countries already carry heavy debt, and every new program adds another line to the public balance sheet.
Higher interest rates make that debt more expensive, forcing governments to juggle ambition with the hard math of sustainability.
Some warn that we are picking winners badly, wasting money and risking inflation. Others fear doing too little, too late.
For decades, we imagined capitalism as a game where firms played, and the state merely refereed from the sidelines.
Now, the state has put on a jersey, stepped onto the pitch, and in many cases is calling the plays.
It chooses which sectors matter most: chips, batteries, green steel, critical minerals, and shapes the environment around them.
For families, this shift shows up in subtler ways, where jobs appear, which bills go up, and how secure the future feels.
In the short term, state activism can revive industries and regions that globalization seemed ready to abandon.
In the long term, the path is less clear. Are we building a more resilient capitalism or laying the groundwork for new crises?
What is clear is that we have left behind the era where markets alone were expected to solve everything. We are entering a phase of capitalism where the state is not just a referee, but often the team captain.
This model could deliver cleaner growth and new industries, or it could deepen divisions, inefficiencies, and geopolitical rivalry.
So the real question is no longer market or state, but what kind of state we want, now that it has stepped onto the field.
If you want to keep exploring how this new era of state-led capitalism reshapes our lives, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe.